Hello, everyone. I think there's maybe one other person watching. But yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in. Um, so I will be starting live now. And before I start, if anyone just like wants to say something in the chat box, just so we know it's working, so I can see all the questions. And I guess like in between questions, I kind of set it to like a minute. So if questions keep coming in and I get to them a little bit later, that's probably why. But yeah, welcome to the live Q&A again. I want to give a huge thank you to all of you for all the love and support you've been giving this project and been giving me on this journey. And I thank you for taking the time tonight to come and sit down with me and talk about the project and talk about kind of my thought process behind everything. So yeah, I'm just gonna wait until I guess a couple more people show up. And if anyone wants to like write anything, if like the volume's okay or you guys can hear me, and yeah, we'll start. I'll just wait for you guys to one of you guys to ask something, or if you guys are still thinking of questions, I guess I can kind of start talking about the project and kind of what inspired me. So I had actually thought about doing something like this back in 2020, towards the end of 2020. I'd actually started choreographing another like piece that wasn't related to what I'm going to be releasing, but I was choreographing it and I was pretty much finished with it, and I was kind of sitting down with people who were giving me like feedback, and they were saying that, well, for your first launch, I guess, as an independent artist, you should kind of, it's nice to do something that's out of the box, but also like introduce people to where your origin is from. So my origin in dance started with Odissi, the classical Indian dance form from my home state in India called Odisha. So that's what I've been learning. I've been learning Odissi since I was 5. And that made sense to me because I was like, well, if I'm going to show everyone who I am as an artist, that Odissi journey has been a really big part of my life. And it still is. It's still a dance form that I'm continuing to learn, and it's one of those dance forms that it's a lifelong learning process, as is any art form. It's not just specific to Odissi. So I wanted to start the program with 2 Odissi pieces. That one would be a storytelling piece or an abhinaya piece, and the second would be a pure dance piece, also known as a pallavi. So that is going to be the first half of the program, and that's basically the introduction because that is my foundation as an artist. That's how I got introduced to the performing arts, and so I wanted people to know that side of me and also about the art form as well, because it is definitely gaining a lot of recognition right now, but compared to other classical dance, Indian dance forms, it doesn't have the same, I guess, exposure. So I want people to know more about Odissi, the beauty behind Odissi, and the history behind Odissi, because it is a centuries um, long art form. So I wanted people to know about it, and I also wanted that to be my introduction. And then the second half of the program is basically my choreographies. So I took basically everything that I've learned from Odissi and other dance forms, and I wanted to make an amalgamation of them into these concepts of the elements. So in Hindu mythology, there are 5 elements. There is earth, there is fire, there is water, air, and space. So when I was thinking of those, I wanted to personify them and put a story behind them, and not just show their raw forms, because that's important too, knowing them in their physical forms, but also other concepts of Hindu mythology that related to each of these elements. So that was basically the second half of the program, is going to be my choreography of each of the elements and how I guess personify them. So yeah, that's just kind of a basic rundown so far of what the program is going to be like. And I think I'll kind of wait a little bit. We have maybe I think like 2 other people in the live right now. So whoever is in the live, thank you for tuning in. And if you guys have any questions, again, there is a chat box, so you can type your questions in the chat and I will answer them. But yeah, we can kind of just wait for a couple more people. I know it's only like 5 minutes into the live. So we can, let me see. Yeah. So we'll wait for a couple more people. Lorena, oh my goodness, thank you for showing up. Yeah, thank you. How are you? I hope you're doing well, and thank you for tuning in. I know it's Sunday, and it's you could be doing better things through Sunday, but you're here, so thank you. But yeah, thanks for tuning in, and yeah, let me know like what questions you have. And it doesn't it. I mean, I guess this is mainly for the program, but if you guys have any other questions, just about like dance in general, or I guess like my journey into being an artist, or like even future like projects that I would be working on or I'm thinking of, because now that this project is coming to an end, I'm kind of like starting to think about the other stuff that I want to do for next year. So yeah, bring on the questions. Thank you, girl. I'm so excited that you're excited. And yes, the first video will be releasing tomorrow. So I guess the way I've like kind of scheduled it is I want everything to be like released by the end of the year. So just I guess for me, it kind of like concludes everything, because I know that it's never going to happen. So this way the schedule is going to work is the first half of the program is going to be released this week. So tomorrow I'll be releasing the first storytelling piece, the Abhinaya piece. And then I guess towards the end of the week, I'll be releasing the pure dance piece. So actually talking about the storytelling piece, I can kind of go into the details about what that is about and what the story actually is. So the storytelling piece is called Nachanti Range, and it talks about the Hindu god Krishna. So Nachanti Range basically means like the dancing god, and Krishna is known for dancing, for playing the flute, for basically just being like always being so like merry and like always being very charismatic. That's actually one aspect of him that if you read the scriptures, you will see that he has this charisma to him that like attracts everybody. And in the dance piece, you see that basically everything he does, it's described as beautiful. Whether he plays the flute, whether he plays the drums, whether he plays the cymbals, and it attracts everyone in the village that he grew up in. So they have cow herdesses in the village, or they're known as gopis. So the gopis, whenever they would hear Krishna play his flute, they would basically like they would be doing their daily chores, and then just hearing him play the flute, they would be so entranced that they would forget everything, and they would kind of like follow the tune to where he was. And then all of them would basically like have a musical together. Like the gopis would be playing some of the instruments, Krishna would be playing some of the instruments, they would be dancing. And this dance all form is also known as something called Raslila. So Raslila is basically known as like eternal like joy. And you get that eternal joy through basically like salvation. And I actually really like this concept because I think salvation to all of us is different things. And it's actually something that like I've experienced in my daily life as well, because I think when we think of like spirituality and we think of, practicing religion, we kind of have, I think, a one track mind about it sometimes. We're like, okay, it's praying or it's meditating. But it's actually like a lot of different things to different people. Like, for example, my father, he's very meditative. So when he like prays, he's very quiet. He can like focus. He can basically sit down in one place and just focus and like rule out any noise. But for different people, that looks different. Like, for example, with my mother, her form of like spirituality is singing. And for me, it's dancing. So I like how in Hindu mythology, it explores spirituality in many different ways. And it explores it through different gods. And it shows how they basically show love to their devotees. So for Krishna, it's dancing, or it's basically like spending time with the gopis. It's making merry with them. And that's a form of devotion. And then for other gods, like for the god Shiva, for example, for him, it's meditation. He's known to go into like very long trances of like meditation and just being in a meditative state. So I think that that's another concept that I really like, that it's so diverse that spirituality doesn't have to be practiced in one way. And we see that with the many different stories that are told in Hindu mythology. So going back to the story of Nachantirange, so it basically like talks about how everything Krishna does is beautiful. Everything he does attracts the gopis and attracts Radha, his, I guess, like one true eternal love is what she's known like. And that's another aspect of a story that actually growing up as a kid, I never understood. And it's still something that's like hard for me to put my mind around. But Radha and Krishna are known as eternal lovers. So they have a love that is pure and eternal. But they were actually like never together. Like when they were alive, they were never able to get married. They were never able to be together because Radha was already married to somebody else. She was older than Krishna. So I think it's interesting to look at that because she knew she had her like marital duties, I guess, but at the same time, like her soul was eternally linked to Krishna. And with this concept of Ras Leela, it kind of explores that, where it's like maybe in the physical world they were never able to be together, but in like the spiritual or like afterlife or eternal world, their love is eternal. So I think it's very interesting too, because like they obviously met each other in the real world, but they never, I don't believe they ever like acted upon like their actual like love. And oh, hello Rishmanti, it's nice to see you. Thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate it. But yeah, so with the story, I think it's interesting to see that obviously they never acted upon that in the material world, but their love for each other was so strong. It didn't always necessarily have to culminate into something physical for it to exist and for people to know that it existed as well. And it's interesting because like as Krishna got older, he married, he became a king and he married other queens. But despite all of that, I think they fulfilled their like duties as, the respect to their respective spouses, but in the eternal world, they like belong together. So yeah, so that's the concept of Nachantirange. It basically talks about I guess Krishna's life like more before he became a king, when he was still growing up in Vrindavan. And he actually grew up in Vrindavan with an adoptive mother. His adoptive mother's name was Yashoda. So there's a story that goes that he was born to a king and a queen, and he had an evil uncle named Guntz. And there was a prophecy that the eighth child of the queen, who was his sister, and her husband would kill him. And so in order to, I guess, save their child, they had to kind of switch children. So Krishna's father, he went and he switched his child with his friend's child who lived in Vrindavan. So Krishna actually grew up in Vrindavan. And he had an adoptive mother, Yashoda. And when he was in Vrindavan, he had like basically the duty of being like the cowherd. So that's what everyone knew him as. And that's actually like his mascot is a cow. And even to this day in India, like cows are very, they're considered like mother, your mother, and like you respect the cow. So in some like places in India, some regions of India, people actually don't eat beef because of that reason. And yeah, so Nachantirange continues to explore that, and there's also like pure dance and segments in Nachantirange. So those pure dance parts still have more of a story to them though than a Pallavi does. So in the pure dance, for example, you can see me doing certain movements, like for example, this is holding a flute. So that will like represent Krishna dancing with the flute, or the cymbals, which are represented by this. And there will be like, so there's parts that are just pure music parts, and then there's actual singing parts. And the singing parts continue to describe Krishna, describe how his heart belongs to the gopis, and his heart kind of lives in Vrindavan and stays in Vrindavan. And I really like that concept because I think even in the story of Krishna, as he becomes a king and he moves away from Vrindavan, you can see that like deep down in his heart, he still is like the cowherd. He still is the lovable, like playful cowherd that is very humble and very down to earth. So that's kind of the gist of Nachantirange. It's basically like it's a very like happy, like jovial piece. It celebrates Krishna. It celebrates his love for life, his love for music, and basically his charisma. So that is Nachanti Range. And then the second piece, Ragashi Pallavi, so that's a pure dance piece. That is, there's not really a story behind it, but Pallavis in general are supposed to show the beauty of the dance form. So you see a lot more of intricacies in like footwork, intricacies in torso movements, which actually in Odissi, the movement, the lower body is very rigid. It's very structured. It has to be very strong. But then the upper half in Odissi is very fluid. So with the upper half, you basically have the fluidity, and that's where your torso moves. So your hips aren't actually supposed to move, just your torso. So you see that like circular movement in Odissi where you have the rigidity of the lower half, but then you have like the circular movement of the upper half. And you can see that a lot in Pallavis. Pallavis start very slow. They start a lot with like the grace, whether it's your eye movements, your neck movements, your torso movements. You see that really broken down, and that explores like the beauty of that movement because you are able to see it more when it's slower. And then as the pallavi goes on, the beats get faster, the music gets faster, and towards the end, a lot of the focus kind of shifts away from the torso and the upper half, and it focuses on the feet. So a general theme with pallavis is there's a lot of like fast and like intricate footwork towards like the last 2 to 3 minutes, and it also tests your stamina a lot. So that's one thing that Odissi dancers, when they will practice the pallavi, that's usually something that they'll dedicate like a lot of time towards because it does test your stamina a lot. So when they will practice the pallavi, they'll actually do a lot of warm-up exercises, and the warm-up exercises are actually rooted in like yoga and ancient yoga as well. So it'll like exercise your upper half, and then you have footwork specific exercises, and there's like two categories of them. There's one called like choka exercises and one called tribhangi exercises. So choka is like basically it's like a squat, and you do all of your footwork in the squat. So that's supposed to like help build up your like musculature in your lower half and your endurance to keep dancing. And then Tribhangi is actually known as like it's like asymmetrical. So Choka is very symmetrical. Tribhangi is slightly asymmetrical because you're kind of putting all of your weight on one side, depending on which side you're doing. But that's actually what adds to the beauty of the dance because there you explore a lot more of like the asymmetry and the torso movements, but you're still working your lower half. So they'll usually start with the warm-ups, and you can see a lot of the Joka and Tribhangi aspects in like the Pallavi choreographies as well. So yeah, as like when you watch this pallavi, you'll see that it'll start very slow, and it'll start a lot more with like the eye movements, the neck movements, and then as it progresses, you'll see a lot more of the foot movements, and you'll see how like the stamina keeps building up. So yeah, that's the first half, and if you guys have any questions so far, either about the first half or like anything about Odissi or even like Hindu mythology in general, feel free to ask. I will definitely answer it to the best of my ability. Because I think it's so nice to actually learn about Hindu mythology through dance. And that's how I actually learned Hindu mythology because as I was like learning the dance pieces, obviously you need to know the story behind them to be able to express them well. So in trying to know the story, I actually ended up reading like a lot of books as a kid, and they have actually in India they have these like comic book series called like Amar Chitra Katha, I believe, and they have them illustrated so beautifully. So that I remember that's something I used to love doing as a kid. I just used to love like reading all of them because one, it was just very entertaining to read, but two, it definitely helped me like understand more of the stories behind the dances and help me express them more because in abhinaya pieces there is still intense like stamina required, but not necessarily all the time. A lot more emphasis is put on the expression of the face. So if you're not able to express it properly or you're not able to tell the story, then I think you kind of lose interest. So the expression is a lot more focused in abhinayas because you kind of have to tell that story from start to finish. But there is definitely still expression in Pallavi pieces. But the expression is a lot more, I guess, feminine. It explores a lot more of the femininity, whether it's shyness, whether it's getting ready. Actually, that's another thing in Pallavis too. You'll see in some Pallavis, they'll show like a woman getting ready, whether like they'll have like a mirror, they'll have her like doing her makeup or putting on jewelry. So Pallavis really do explore a lot of like the femininity of Odissi and just femininity of women in general. But there are like some Pallavis that also link that back to nature. So there's a Pallavi called Meg Pallavi, which is about the rain, and it describes like the beauty of the rain and the monsoon season and how it relates to the beauty of femininity as well. So that's kind of the gist of the first half. Just kind of talking about what you see. But yeah, if there's any questions, I'll give you guys a couple of minutes to just kind of like process what I said. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask before we kind of move on to the second half. Or yeah, if you guys need to like take a break or something, get some water, go to the bathroom, go ahead. So for the Odyssey half of the program, I didn't actually choreograph it. Those two pieces have been already been choreographed, because they are more like classical traditional pieces. And oh, hello Renandi, thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate you really being here. And yeah, I'm excited that you're excited to see the presentation. And it's, yeah, like I said, the first piece will release tomorrow, so it's here. It's finally here. But yeah, so with the choreography, the first half, all the Odyssey pieces, they haven't been choreographed by me. I've just been taught them, and like when they've been taught to me, they've obviously whoever taught them to me refined them a lot more. But the second half with the elements, that's actually a concept that was kind of introduced to me actually by my mom. And I was thinking about it. She was telling me like I think this would be a great concept to do, and she was kind of like sending me music, and she was saying I think this would go great with it. And I was thinking about it, and I was like, that's actually a great place to start, talking about the elements. So all of the element choreography has been done by me, so that'll be the second half of the program, which will start releasing next week. And those musical pieces aren't like traditional Odissi musical pieces, but they're more like instrumental, like contemporary pieces. But they have Indian instruments like in them. So they have like the sitar or like tabla music, which is drum music. So when I was thinking of like doing the elements, actually, I thought it would be a great time to kind of talk about them, just because like we were in the pandemic at the time, we're still in the pandemic. And I was thinking about how I think like desensitized we have been to our behaviors like as consumers, because I think growing up in a mainly capitalistic society, and Lorena, you and I have definitely talked about this, we kind of lose a sense of like what it takes for us to survive and how much we use to survive. And sometimes we don't even need to use that much to survive. And I was actually reading an article somewhere that like the rate at which we're going will probably need like 1.8 or 2 times more the amount of resources that the Earth already has. So that's like a kind of scary concept to think about. So when I was choreographing these concepts, I was like thinking about the pandemic, thinking about everything, and I was just like, I wanted to choreograph something that just kind of like grounded me back into like very like the basics. Just like what are the elements? Like where are we from? Like composes us and what are we dependent on. So actually, the first concept I was thinking of was like Earth, and when I thought of Earth, I related it back to like Mother Earth. And when I choreographed that piece, I was actually thinking of um, kind of like agricultural society and how that came to be. So in that piece, I definitely do like explore just like the raw aspects of Mother Earth, whether it's like, trees or the ground or like dirt. But then I tried to tie a story into it as well of like harvesting. And I tied that story into it because obviously with Earth, you think of the harvest, and a lot of cultures, they have the celebration of a harvest. So whether it's in the summer or in the spring, they will get together as a community and they will celebrate all the hard work that they've put in. And I really like that concept because it ties back into how when we are symbiotic with nature and the resources that it provides us, it helps build our sense of community as well. So in that choreography, I explore that where I am showing the harvesting process. So like whether it's growing the seeds or like chopping the produce after it's been grown, or getting together and like whether you're grinding wheat into like um, bread or things like that. So it made me think about how like if we didn't have nature or we didn't have this like planet to live on, we wouldn't even have each other. And the harvest season, like while yes, it's definitely a difficult time to grow everything and cultivate. I think process of cultivating, when you're going through the hard work, you have that sense of community. You have other people helping you. You have other people kind of supporting you. And then afterwards, when you celebrate the harvest, you get to celebrate it together. You get to see the fruits of your labor. So that's what I explored with the earth aspect. And I wanted to tie the beauty of Mother Nature back into the sense of community that we have created around Mother Nature. And now, I mean, in this day and age, obviously, most of us, we go to the grocery store, we get our produce. So there's not like too much community building when we go grocery shopping. But we still have that to this day, whether we invite people over for dinner or for lunch, or whether we cook together or we have a potluck. There is still like, it's still been like passed down from generation to generation, maybe in a different way. So I was just thinking about like, yeah, produce, like food, all these things, like they bring us together. They are our sense of community. They're what keep us linked together. So it's nice to kind of pay homage to that and to realize that the everyday things that we do, maybe we take them for granted, but they are a huge part of who we are. They help us not just, nourish ourselves. Food isn't just there to nourish us, but it helps us, keep our relationships alive, connect with the people that we love. And now more than ever, with this pandemic, when we didn't get that as much, and that's something I think that maybe we took for granted. Now that we have it again, or somewhat have it again to some degree, it kind of reminds us how like we shouldn't take those things for granted. So that was kind of the gist of my choreography of Earth. And then when it comes to air and water, actually, I just kind of stayed more towards, I guess, like expressing them in their raw form. So when it comes to air, obviously we can't like see air. So when I was doing the choreography, I actually used a scarf to kind of show my movements or the air's movements as I was like twirling the scarf around. And that was kind of supposed to represent air. And then with water, when you see like with my choreography, I have a lot of like fluid movements, whether it's like with my hands or whether it's with like the torso concept of ODC, where you have like the fluidity in the torso. I tried to incorporate a lot of that into water because, it's when you think of fluidity, you see water, you think of like ripples, you think of fluidity, and that's what I wanted to show in that choreography. And I also wanted to kind of show a bit of like the monsoon season because I feel like water is never complete without the rain. So I show a little bit of that. And then I also kind of show some like instruments because the way the water music works, it kind of like breaks down different instruments. So you hear a little bit of the flute, you hear a little bit of like the drums, you hear a little bit of the cymbals. And that kind of like I think ties back into Nachan Tirange a little bit as well. So I have like some of that pure dance in water, but then I also have kind of like, it's kind of like a back and forth between like the instruments, the water, and just kind of how they all like harmonize together. So that was my like thought process when I was doing water. And then one of my, actually, I think this one was my favorite piece to choreograph was Fire, because Fire, I think, is so rooted in Hindu mythology as well, not just as like, it's not just an element on its own. I think there's so much storytelling potential behind Fire. So I tried to kind of incorporate that when I was choreographing Fire. So I wanted to show like the duality of Fire. I wanted to show how Fire is like calm, but Fire is also destructive. So when I started like choreographing Fire, and when you hear the intro to like the Fire music, it starts very like slow. It starts very calm. And I also wanted to start my choreography very slow and calm. So I kind of start with like a small like candle, and I show the candle. I kind of show like an evening prayer. I That's something like that. Actually, whenever I went back and visited India, that's something that was very calming to me. I always loved it when we sat down with our family, or I heard other people in the neighborhood, like I could hear them like do their evening prayer. We usually use like a small like bell to do our prayers. It's called like a ghanti, and you can always hear like you can have it, and then you can always hear like other people in their homes when they're doing it. You can hear like them ring the bell. So it was very calming for me, and I enjoyed that because it was kind of like a nice close to the day. It's kind of like a nice the day is over, you do your prayer, and it's kind of like you kind of like wrap up the day, and it's very like cathartic. It's like, now the day is done. It's a nice way to kind of like reflect on the day and just be thankful for the day. So that's why I love like evening prayers. And even like when I go back home and visit and my father does evening prayers, it's very calming. I think it just brings like a very like soothing atmosphere to whoever's around um, that area. It's very nice. It's very soothing. And so I wanted to incorporate that into the first half where we have the music is very calm, and I wanted to show that calmness of Fire. The fire doesn't always necessarily have to be a destructive thing. It's a source of warmth. It can be a source of comfort. So that's where I started. I started with kind of like that concept of an evening prayer, and you can see when you see the final product, you'll see that I'm kind of doing the evening prayer in the beginning. And then I go into actually describing the Lord Shiva, because the Lord Shiva, he has kind of two phases to himself. He has a meditative phase where he's very calm. He's very concentrated. Nothing bothers him. And then we call it, I guess, like the opening of his third eye. And that's usually when something angers him, or, he's sent to destroy evil in the world, because Lord Shiva is known as the destroyer of evil. And he does the destruction of evil through a dance form called Tandav, which is known as like a dance of anger. It's a very passionate dance. So when he does the dance, basically as he's dancing, he's destroying anything and everything in his path. So that usually happens to him when he opens his third eye and he gets mad. But when he's in his meditative state, obviously the third eye is not open. He's very calm. He's very meditative. So that's another aspect that I explore of him as well. And I'm kind of describing him because Shiva is known to be covered in like ashes. He's a very unique god, because I think when you think of like gods and goddesses, usually you think of them as like, nice clothing, nice jewelry, and all of those things. And I think Shiva is kind of the exact opposite of that. He's known to just wear like a lion cloth. He covers himself in ashes, and he doesn't live in luxury. He's very simple in his living. So that, I think, again, like complements his like meditative mood as well, the simplicity. But then when you have him open his third eye, which as the music of Fire progresses, the music gets louder and it gets more intense. When he opens his third eye, that's when like I start doing like a Tandav type dance, or like the anger dance, and you see like the steps are very like harsh, and the movements are very like exaggerated, and of course the expression, the eyes are very big. You see the anger, and it's mainly seen through the eyes. And eye expression is like a big aspect of Odissi, and a lot of Indian classical dance in general, you have to be able to kind of show that through your eyes. And so a lot of attention is basically put there. It's in the eyes, it's in those like rigid, it's in those like very loud foot movements. So when you hear like a dancer's foot go down, you can hear it percuss very loudly. And that's another aspect of Odissi dance actually that is part of your training, to be able to like get your feet to make noise, because when you still wear like bells when you dance so people can hear your feet, but it's still nice to be able to percuss your feet so that people can hear your foot movements. And when it comes to dances, like intense dances like this, it's very nice to have so that people can see and feel the intensity of the dance more. So yes, when Shiva exits his meditative state and he goes into the anger state, he's basically it's like a dancing frenzy for him. He's dancing and destroying all the evil in his path. So as you see the dance like continue, it'll start calmly, it'll get more intense, and then it culminates at the end into just kind of like, it's a catharsis at the end. So without giving away too much of the choreography, that's just kind of the concept of it. But yeah, I would definitely say like fire was my favorite element to choreograph, just because I do love Tandav dances, and I do love when it comes to Odissi, I love dances about Shiva. I love dances about the goddess Durga as well, and the goddess Kali. They kind of, I think, all go hand in hand, because those gods kind of represent the dual nature of, I think, humans in general too. You know, we can be very calm and meditative, we can be in a very good mood, but then obviously we get angry, we get frustrated sometimes. But these aren't things to, I think, necessarily be like demonize ourselves for. They're things that we can acknowledge, and they're things that we can work towards expressing better and handling better. Um, and I think that's another aspect of Hindu mythology that I really like, is it doesn't demonize emotions. It actually explores them more, and it explores why sometimes we can let emotions get the better of us. And it even personifies them. Like, it even shows sometimes that like gods and goddesses, they're known to be the epitome of perfection. But even they can let their emotions get to themselves sometimes, you know, whether it's anger, whether it's pride, whether it's greed, whether it's lust, like any of those things. But they can realize that, and then they, you know, obviously better themselves. But it's nice to see that the emotion is so heavily, I guess, explored in Hindu mythology, and I think that's what makes Odissi dance and just classical Indian dance in general such a vast art form to keep exploring, because there's just so much to say and so much to show that I don't think there's ever going to be like a shortage of stories to tell. Thank you, Rinanti. I'm glad that you're enjoying the concepts and you're enjoying my theories behind them and how I kind of wanted to express them. But yeah, last but not least, going on to the last element in Hindu mythology, space. So I think space is something that actually I struggled with the most, just because we're not always necessarily surrounded by like space except the sky. So I kind of had to do a little bit more research into space, just because, and I did my research into the other elements as well, but space was something that I kind of had to really map out a little bit more. And I kind of mapped it out by thinking about astrology and like Hinduism and astrology, because astrology is a big part of Hinduism as well, and like the zodiacs. But I believe that in Hindu mythology, they follow the lunar calendar more than like the sun calendar like we do here. So when I was doing space, I definitely wanted to incorporate like the cosmos somehow, like whether it was planets and just like the vastness of what space is. So when I was choreographing space, I was kind of thinking about how I would show the human experience of space and the human wonder of space, and how humans like would explore space or see it in awe, basically. So when I start with space, I basically have this choreography and expression where I'm in awe of everything around me. Like, I'm just kind of looking at the sky, and I'm just in awe of how vast it is and how much there is to explore. Like, there's already so much to explore just here on Earth, but there's also so much more to explore that's in the sky. And as the choreography goes on, it's the music itself is very gentle and like calming, and it's very meditative. And so I wanted to bring that concept of meditation into space as well, because I think some of you guys might have heard of like chakras, and how you want to balance your chakras and you want to um, be in homeostasis with yourself. So when I was thinking of space too, I was kind of thinking about that homeostasis aspect as well, because there's actually one story that as a kid, my dad actually told me, and it was one of the different avatars of Vishnu. So Vishnu, he's another one of like three main gods. He's known as basically like the protector of the world as well, and he comes in like different eras to the earth, to basically in different forms, to rid it of evil. So in one era, he was basically he came as actually a tortoise first, and this was where like the demons and the gods were basically like trying to figure out who was going to rule over the heavens. And they were churning the earth. Or no, they're not churning the earth, sorry. They were churning the sea, and various things were coming out of the sea. And this like final thing that came out of the sea was this nectar of immortality. And obviously, like once the nectar of immortality came out, they were fighting over who was going to get it. And then Vishnu saw this, and he knew that like the demons couldn't be immortal. Like if they were going to be immortal, like the world would just go to chaos. So he actually came as another avatar within that like tortoise avatar. He came as an avatar known as Mohini, or the Enchantress. So he basically transformed himself into this really, really irresistibly beautiful woman. And obviously, once the gods and like the demons saw this woman, they were entranced by her beauty. And so his concept behind this was he was going to use his beauty to distract the demons so he could give all the nectar to the gods. And it was working for a while, until one of the demons, his name is Rahu, he saw what was happening. And so he disguised himself as one of the gods. And he was about to get the nectar. And just as he was about to, like, he had already drank it when I think one of the gods pointed out that this wasn't actually a god, it was a demon. But by then it was too late. So Rahu had gained immortality. And I think there is like a concept of him where he is like in the sky, and I don't know what eclipse it is, but I think some concept of an eclipse, or like that's kind of how I think they explained an eclipse, where it was like Rahu was kind of eating up whatever planet or like celestial body was going to have to be eclipsed. So I thought like that story, like relating back to astrology and space, was very interesting. And yeah, so space definitely, I think as a concept, it was a lot more abstract and harder for me to kind of think of how I was going to like personify it. But at the same time, I think it was a very good learning experience, because I got to learn a lot more about Hindu mythology, and how astrology ties into Hindu mythology. And I think that's when I like learned a lot more about the zodiac signs, because I know like some people, I think they can be kind of iffy about like believing in zodiacs, and to some degree, yeah, it can be a little. I think people think like, okay, they're so generalized. Like, how are they going to apply to each individual person? But I think it's also interesting to kind of see how the generalizations sometimes, like in some aspects of your life, I think when you're like, wow, that I would have never thought like my thought process or how I reacted to that would be somewhat like representative of my zodiac. So I think it's a very interesting concept to explore. Obviously, I don't think like it's the one and only truth, because I think to completely go based off of a generalized zodiac is it can be like detrimental to you, because I think then you don't explore other aspects of yourself. But I think it's nice to see how like sometimes your zodiac can kind of like personify you a little bit. So that was something else I had a lot of fun researching when I was thinking of space. But yeah, that was kind of like my thought process behind my choreographies. And I definitely wanted to, I guess, put it out there, especially during the time of the pandemic, where a lot of us are spending a lot more time alone, and we are going through like a health crisis. And I think it's nice to kind of take that time to go back to the basics, especially since like obviously before the pandemic, like I think us as a society, we're always like go go go. Like we don't really take time to sit down and think about ourselves, or like why we do the things we do, or why we react the way we react. And I think that's so important when we're exploring the world around us, and not just the world around us, but exploring ourselves. Because I think to me, truly, you can't experience the world around you if you don't know how you experience the world around you, if that makes sense. And I think in order to know that, you kind of have to have a concept of yourself. And sometimes I think we get so caught up in the everyday that we forget to just take time and like think about what do I want, or what am I thinking, or why am I reacting. So I think when I was choreographing the concept of the elements as well, it was actually a great like reflection, not just for me reflecting on the world, but me reflecting on myself too, because it made me realize like how I feel about, you know, the world around me, the planet around me, and also about like issues that are so prevalent to us today, like climate change. You know, we all talk about it, and it's so like it's kind of like sad to me how we've already normalized like, okay, it's like it's already going to complete garbage. And I'm like, it's so sad that like we've already internalized that a little bit. And it's a scary concept to think about, but I definitely think there's potential to like improve and, you know, grow out of it. Obviously, maybe we can't get to a point of perfection, but definitely to a point of sustainability where all of us can have access to resources, but not overconsumption. And that's another concept that I've been thinking about a lot too, like overconsumption and capitalism. And like Lorena, if you're still in the chat, it's something that you've definitely inspired me a lot to read more about, because as much as, you know, we should, like, you know, we want to do the best for ourselves, we want to have, you know, a good life. At the same time, I think there's a difference between having a fulfilled life and having an overly like materialistic life. And I think half the time when we consume things, we don't necessarily always need them. And I think it's a good reflection of like, you know, whenever you just buy things, and not just buy things, but even when you're like in your everyday life, when you're just going about out and about, it's nice to just kind of take some time, sit down and think about, okay, what am I doing? Like, what am I putting out to the world? Or how, like the things that I'm consuming, what, like, is it serving a purpose to me, or am I getting something out of it? Or like, how is it affecting me? And if it has no purpose to me, like, why am I using it? Why am I getting another one of this thing? Or why, like, even if there's a sale happening, like, do I necessarily need the stuff in the sale? Just because the sale is there doesn't mean that I need to go and buy those things. And we see this so much in like, even in like industries that weren't so affected by it are getting affected by it now. Like the fashion industry, for example. Like 10 years ago, when we bought like clothes for the new school year, let's say, maybe we bought like 5 new items of clothing, and that was our wardrobe, like our new wardrobe for the school year. But now, I was reading in another article, like the average amount of clothing that people are getting now per year that's new is like almost like 60 to 70 new items of clothing, because fast fashion is a booming business now. You can get clothes online for very cheap, very like free shipping, like anything. Like you can get like clothes for like $5. And so it feeds into this cycle of consumerism. And it's not just in like fashion, it's in like the makeup industry now too. Like back in the day, like we didn't have so much like we weren't going out and buying makeup all the time. We had our like one set of makeup, and once it expired, then we went and bought new makeup. But now there's always a flash sale for this or a flash sale for that. So we just have like piles and piles of things that we might not ever even end up using, but we just feel like we have to get them because there's a sale, or it's a seasonal thing and it might not come back again. So I think it's like, even within like these concepts, it all like relates back to our everyday life somehow. And I think like something that I really appreciate about this project and going through this choreography process was not just creating these choreographies, but really taking the time to like think about my consumerism patterns, and just how like I can be better at not over consuming, and just be like more grounded in everything that's around me. Be thankful for everything that's around me, and just take everything that I'm getting like day by day, one at a time, and trying to make the most of everything that I have. So yeah, this was basically just my, I guess, whole thought process of what I hope to accomplish with this program. And hopefully you guys, when you watch this program, you get, you feel the same sentiments, and obviously your own sentiments as well. And I'm actually really curious to know that after the program is over, I will hold another kind of like Q&A session at the end of the month. And that Q&A, it'll kind of be more just getting everyone's feedback. Like, I would be really interested to know how you guys interpreted what I did or what I created. And I think we would all be able to have a great discussion on everyone's input and everyone's thought process. And that's another goal of mine as an artist, you know, obviously to put ideas that I have out into the world, but also to be able to get other people to think about their ideas and think about new ideas, and just hopefully get people to think about things, and have discussions, because as people, for us to keep progressing, we need to keep having discussions, and whether they might be uncomfortable sometimes, but we need to have them. Otherwise, if we keep just like sweeping things under the rug, we never come to a solution, and we just keep going through this cycle of, okay, well, everything's just going to be horrible someday. So yeah, hopefully after you guys watch this program, you guys enjoy it, and it definitely, you know, makes you guys think about things and have discussions. And yeah, I hope that you guys enjoyed this Q&A, and hopefully any questions that you guys had got answered. And if you guys have any like last minute questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We still have like 8 minutes, so thank you, Rathi. Thanks for tuning in. I really appreciate that. Thank you for appreciating the zodiac. Yeah, it's really interesting, because I think like the zodiac is something that like I've always like heard about, but I never really like thought of in depth until I started doing the choreography. And it's so nice to know, like, it was nice for me to explore how, like, I guess my zodiac came into how I think as a person, because I'm a Libra. So Libra is known as like, they're like, I think their sign is like the balance. So I guess Libras are known to like want harmony and like try to always be in homeostasis, which is interesting, because I think when I'm like alone, that's something that I'm really like, something I strive for. But I've also found that like a good aspect of that is like, when we're surrounded by different energies, we kind of latch onto those energies. So if I'm surrounded by like friends of mine that aren't Libras, for example, I will kind of, the more time I spend around them, the more I'll start kind of picking up on like their thought process. And it's really beautiful, because then I get like the best of everything. I get to experience other zodiacs and like, I guess, how they interpret the world around them. And I put that into my thought process as well. Like, okay, I never thought of something this way, but now that like I have that input and I've spent that time with you and I see how you see things, I can see this differently now. But yeah, thank you so much, Unanti. I'm glad that you appreciate my research and the amount of time I've put into it. And I'm glad that hopefully you got something out of this discussion. I hope you all got something out of this discussion. And yeah, I'm really excited to release the first dance tomorrow. I hope you guys enjoy it. And yeah, I can't wait for you guys to see it. All right. I will just hang around for a couple more minutes in case anyone has any more questions. No, thank you. thank you all for tuning in. This has been great. And it's really funny because like usually when I like think of concepts and stuff, I talk a lot to myself. Like I talk out loud a lot. And as crazy as it sounds, it definitely helps me like start materializing things. And that's actually something that I did a lot when I was like choreographing these pieces. Thank you, Ma. Thank you for joining the chat. But yeah, that's something I did a lot when I was choreographing the pieces, and I'm pretty sure my neighbors thought I was crazy. But when I would like sit down and choreograph, I'd kind of like pause a little bit, and I would just talk to myself, and I'd be like, okay, well, we could express it this way, or we could express it that way, but then how would we express it this way? So I found that like talking out loud for me really helps me kind of materialize things and start seeing where things are going. So it's really nice like actually talking to an audience, because like what I'm doing right now is what I did like by myself like months ago. So it's nice to finally have an audience to like ramble to, because yeah, rambling alone, like it is fun. I'm not gonna lie. I don't think like as much as like people would be like, oh well, talking to yourself. I think talking to yourself is an amazing thing, and I think it's a great thing to do because you have to be your own best friend too. You know, it's great to have friends. Obviously, you know, I appreciate all the friends in my life, but then I feel like my friends can't appreciate me if I don't appreciate myself. So I think to have those conversations with yourself and just to like talk to yourself like you're your friend, it's great, because then I think when you have that like comfort level with yourself when you're with your friends. Yes, Lorena, down with capitalism. No, you're good. You're good. But yeah, when you like talk to yourself, I think like you definitely have a lot more love for yourself. And then when you go and like you meet your friends, you meet your family, they can see that too. And like you become like the best version of yourself around them as well. So yeah, if there's nothing else you guys got out of this, just bottom line, just talk to yourselves. You know, have a great conversation with yourself. It's actually for me when I like am stressed out or things like that. I find that like when I obviously dancing is a great stress relief for me, but also when I just like talk things out, it makes me feel much better. And also like journaling too. It's actually something that Lorena, I know like you've talked about journaling, and I've actually that's something that I've been like trying to do recently. I've been really bad about doing it like every day. But anytime that I do journal, it's very nice because I can always go back and like revisit it and be like, huh, like that's how I was feeling at that moment. And it's really interesting to see like how I was feeling then and how like I tried, maybe if I was feeling bad, like what did I do to make myself feel better? So yeah, love yourself, guys. You know, that's you have yourself for life, so you have to love yourself. You know, it's very important. And I think through that discovery and journey of self-love, you actually learn a lot more about yourself than you thought you knew. And that's like I think that's a beautiful aspect of being human, is like no matter how old you are, I think you can always learn something new about yourself. And that's something that I really love about art and dance and just being an artist in general, is that anytime I embark on something new, it always opens up a new aspect of myself that like I didn't even know existed. Um, or new thoughts and ideas that I wouldn't have thought of. And that's why I love like watching other artists as well, or talking to other artists. They're not even just like artists, just people in general, because I think when you have a one track mind of a one track view of the world and like tunnel vision of the world, it's so easy to get caught up in that you kind of forget that you're like kind of one speck in the whole universe. There's so many other specks. There's so many other people. And there's so many life experiences and so many stories to tell. That's very important. And I think I think I think hands down, my favorite part about being an artist is being able to tell stories. And being able to tell stories, especially stories that haven't been vocalized as much. And I think art is a great medium to do that, because art is something that it does resonate with a lot of people. And when people see their stories being represented, people see themselves being represented through art, it gives them a voice that maybe they thought they didn't have. And when everyone has a voice, I think that's how we can keep growing as a society. So, yeah. Well, I think it's about time for the live to end. So I just, again, want to give a huge thank you to everybody for tuning in. I appreciate you all so much, and I appreciate your continuous love and support so much. Without you guys, really, this wouldn't be possible. Like, I wouldn't have anybody to create for, and I wouldn't have an audience to watch me. So thank you all so very much. I feel so loved, and I hope you guys feel through my program. You guys see my work and everything that I've put into it, and I hope you guys really enjoy it. So yeah, I hope you guys have a great rest of your evening, rest of your weekend, and stay tuned for tomorrow. Oh, I love you, Tutti Nanti. I love you all so much. Bye. Have a good night.